apologize for this delay getting started today. This day we're going to be wrapping up a series that we began 2 weeks ago that was inspired by from the Matrix, when Trader says to EMP, electromagnetic pulse. It's all weapon against the machines. And EMP became the root word of empathy as a weapon against technocracy, against AI, amongst other phenomenon. And for the past 2 weeks, we've been exploring that to various degrees at various levels, including last week we focused we found out on creatives, being creative, what exactly that means, and how does one who is creative, how does one define one's position, one's vocation, one's value, one's relevance, where it seems to be able to generate in seconds what it takes a creative days or weeks, months, or years to create. These large language models and so-called generative AI have these capacities for, exactly as the name suggests, generating visual or auditory or written creative works. But of course, as we've been exploring, they're not creative. They're iterative. They're derivative. If anything, they're degenerative in the same sense that a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy degrades the quality with each iteration, with each duplication, and each reproduction. And that taking things apart and putting them back together in a more fresh way may contain some elements of surprise and novelty, and there may be some newness to them, there may be some uniqueness to them. But if a machine has it, it will not possess, excuse me, it will not possess the spirit, the essence, the magic. And that's what our focus was on last week. The word made flesh, in other words. Hang on a second. I have some. Hang on a second. Looks like we might have some technical difficulties here. Oh, and now my, is that any better? Is that any better, the sound? Or maybe I'll just post a comment. No. Okay. So no, the sound is not better. test, test, test. No, it's still scratchy, people say. Um, darn it. Gee, I don't know what to do now. I've run out of tricks. What about now? Well, at first I thought the scratchiness was just the frog in my throat, but I've cleared that, so can't be that. Huh. Huh.
How about this? Is that any better? Ah, what a bummer. Okay, so that's better, but I'm actually using a different microphone. That is a bit better, but the volume is low. So the reason why the volume is low is I switched to the microphone on my webcam, and unfortunately, I don't know if there's a way to get around that. Maybe I can pump up the volume that way.
How about now? Any improvement? Unfortunately, I gotta rely on you guys. I don't have a headphone plugged in to be able to hear what I sound like. I should probably do that, right? Could probably do that. Yeah, the scratching sound came back. It's the there must be it's Windows 11. It's there's no way for me to fix it while I'm in the middle of the live stream. I don't think. Did this make any difference? Yeah, I have one of those headphones, but my computer is too far away. I can't plug it in. Um, I could, I suppose I could try to, listen with my phone, but that would be, uh, that would be bizarre. You know what? I'll switch back to if this is not good, I'll switch back to the webcam microphone, and just have to make do with that, which is a shame because, um, well, what are you going to do?
So I'll crank up the volume. How is that now for volume? The scratchiness should be gone now. And I got this thing in the way. Let's see, visual effects. Let's go back. Ah. Well, and I can't seem to get my. I don't know how I can.
That's a solvable problem. How's that happening now? Can you guys hear me at all? Technology. This is one thing we don't have a defense against, unfortunately. We rely on it at its mercy, and there's not much we can do. Okay, so this is not going to work out. So
What about this? So let's. I'm going back to my. This is. I'm back on the webcam mic. So this is. I'm gonna have to just rely on this today, and I'll have to troubleshoot the other microphone later. It's Windows 11, right? Windows 11 is just a travesty of a piece of software. So let's. Yeah, okay. So I moved the camera closer now, as you probably can tell. Here, let's do that. Okay. Oh, too much. Okay. So move the camera closer. The mic. I'm closer to the mic now. The webcam. So hopefully we'll just muddle through it as best we can. Um, it's ironic. We're going to be talking about defense against mechanicity and empathy, right? We can't we can't afford to let ourselves get worked up. We can't afford to let ourselves get troubled by mechanicity, and that includes these technological snafus. And Lord knows I've experienced enough of them in my life that they're just not worth getting worked up about. There's nothing, while you're in the middle of it. There's nothing that you can do about it. So I'll just zoom out, not too far though. Okay, and so patience and staying relaxed, staying grounded, these are all important. And mechanical nature tests us. The nature and purpose of the adversary is to trigger us, is to get us to react. And react how? React mechanically. And this is the aspect of our conflict or struggle with mechanicity that we've been talking about for the past 2 weeks. Its ultimate purpose, its ultimate goal is to defeat us, to enslave us, to capture our consciousness and siphon off our energy. And when it gets to us, when a situation like when some technological snafu gets to us and we get worked up and we get agitated and frustrated and impatient and angry, all that energy is siphoned off. It's spent, it's consumed by mechanical forces inside of us. It is consumed by our mechanical nature. It is imperative that we comprehend the nature of the game, for lack of a better word. The nature of our present condition, the human condition. We are spirits here having a physical experience. Now, that's not a revelation to anyone, or at least it shouldn't be. But what trips many people up is the duality of nature. Because you have a physical body, you have a brain, you have a personality. These are all aspects of your vessel, your character, that which the spirit occupies and makes use of for the duration of your life. And if I were to ask you about nature, do you not find it extremely pleasant and uplifting and empowering, recharging to go out into nature? Do we not nourish ourselves with the fruits of nature and the healthier, the more vibrant, the more natural, the whole foods that we eat? Do they not fill us with profound energy and vitality and refresh us and recharge us? And do we not seek out beautiful places in nature and grand vistas and beautiful outlooks and climbing mountains and all the rest of it, going into deep forests and being by the water or being in the water or indeed under the water? For those who enjoy scuba diving or snorkeling or free diving, so when we think of nature, is nature not a beautiful divine creation? And when you look at yourself in the mirror, or you look at your spouse, your wife, your husband, or you look at your child, do you not marvel at their beauty? And you can marvel at the beauty of flowers and birds and all sorts of animals, all sorts of wildlife. Again, those aforementioned vistas or mountains or plateaus or meadows, even deserts have a beauty about them. It is right and proper to seek refuge and to recharge, to rejuvenate oneself, to go forest bathing, and all the other ways in which we can commune with nature and benefit from its divine properties, its divinely designed, orchestrated, and expressed truth, its beingness, God made flesh in this phenomenon which we call nature. But nature has a duality about it. And while it is right and good to partake in and appreciate the divine aspects of nature, if we ignore the duality in nature, if we ignore its mechanical aspects, if we become sentimental about nature, we identify and become attached to nature, not only the nature out there, but our own nature, our own nature as mortals, our mortal nature, our physical body, our mind, our emotions, our vitality, and our personality. If we become sentimental about these aspects of ourself, and we identify too much with the nature out there and in here, and not consider mechanical nature, the other side of that duality, then we fall into a desperate trap. We are blindsided and we are freely exploited because we are duped. And that is why all desire that we experience expresses itself in the form of a temptation. That's why there is something alluring about nature, even its mechanical aspects. In fact, its mechanical aspects have even more of an allure to them. How many of you watch Shark Week on the Discovery Channel? Or how many of you watch nature documentaries in general? And this is a rhetorical question, but it's one that you can answer for yourself. When you observe sharks in a feeding frenzy, or a pack of lionesses hunting, or any predator, apex predator, hunting its prey and catching its prey and tearing it limb from limb, which nowadays is pretty much what nature documentaries are about most of the time, because that's what, quote, sells the advertising. That's what people want to see, because there's something alluring about that. There's something thrilling about that, exhilarating. There's something within us that wants to see that. It's the same aspect in us that enjoys watching bad news and watching stories about natural disasters and floods and things collapsing and so on. It's one of the reasons why so much of our entertainment is packed with violence or disaster movies or horror movies. Because like begets like, and entertainment on that level is stimulation. When something of a like frequency vibrates, that which vibrates at the same frequency will begin to vibrate. It'll pick up the vibes, the frequencies, and they will vibrate together. Like begets like. So the elements of mechanical nature, and these are mechanical elements, they are not stimulated without the prerequisite cause, without the prerequisite vibrations. So, for example, if you are watching a beautiful, tranquil, picturesque scene of nature, the mechanical elements in your psyche, those algorithms that vibrate at the frequencies of exhilaration and thrilling and excitation, they are not stimulated by the tranquil, beautiful, peaceful, idyllic meadow. And so that's why the majority of stuff you see on the Discovery Channel and on the TV in general has what is stimulating, what stimulates these excitement centers inside of us. And it is through those excitement centers that we are raised into a heightened state of excitability, a heightened state of energetic use. And we become that because our consciousness becomes identified and attached to whatever it is we are watching that is stimulating those excitement centers. And it's this positive feedback loop, but it's a downward spiral. So the more they stimulate us, the more excitable we get, the more aroused we are. Aroused is even a better word than excitable, because not everything is exciting in that strict sense of that word. But the arousal of our energy, we can be aroused. Our fear can be aroused. Our our curiosity can be aroused. our intellectual curiosity. And if you know anything about YouTube and other websites, you know all about clickbait, how these headlines are crafted and these thumbnails are crafted to pique our curiosity, to arouse our intellectual curiosity. Oh, what is that? That sounds interesting. Or that, I wonder what they're talking about. I want to know what they're talking about, because it's always some kind of tease. In other words, those who are very skilled and are very clever have managed to figure out a kind of formula for how to push the right buttons to create that intellectual curiosity and arouse viewers on the internet, to get them to click on a link, click on an image, and be taken to a video, or be taken to a web page, or be taken to a blog or a podcast, or whatever the case may be, where immediately that user's presence gets recorded. It's called an impression. And whatever banners are listed there, they get triggered as having someone has seen that advertising. This is called clickbait. And then the banners themselves, the advertising banners themselves, are often clickbait in and of their own right. How many times have you done a Google search and a whole bunch of results came up on the first page, and you clicked on one because it sounded like it was a resource that was going to satisfy the information that you were looking for? And when you clicked on it, you were taken to a company's website, and they immediately began trying to sell you stuff. And when you clicked back on your browser, you went back to Google, and you noticed there was a little, in kind of grayed out letters next to the link that you clicked on, it said sponsored. And then when you took a closer look at all the results from your Google search, you found that the first 3, 4, 5, 6 were all quote unquote sponsored links. They may have had some vague passing relevance to one of the search terms that you had put into Google, but in no way, shape, or form were they actually going to provide you the information that you were looking for. And now when you do a Google search, that's the norm. The first 5 to 10 or how many links that Google shows you are all sponsored links, some of which have very little relevance whatsoever to whatever it is that you're searching for. So this is not what I'm describing to you should not be a mystery to you. You run into it every day, all the time. And the reason why things are the way they are out there in the world is because if you observe yourself, that's how they are in your own psychology. Because clickbait is just a fancy online term for temptation, for that which is alluring. And let's face it, online, you're dealing with machines. It's an entirely mechanical medium. We say digital, but digital just means hyper mechanical. When I say hyper mechanical, it's because everything is reducible to ones and zeros, which is the fundamental binary relationship of mechanicity: on or off, minimum, maximum, this or that, right or wrong, yes or no. But it is hyper mechanical because, having been reduced to ones and zeros, those ones and zeros now form the foundation
for a new alternate reality. We even have virtual digital realities. We call them virtual realities. We have and video games and let's face it, you can take a deep dive into the World Wide Web or into the online world, and now you can even order all of your food and everything be delivered to your door. So you never have to leave the house. You never have to unplug from this surreal digital alternative reality, which is purely mechanical. There are very, very, very narrow pinholes and slivers of consciousness uh, to be gained via this thing that we call the internet. I mean, you're here today watching a live stream on YouTube. So is this wholly mechanical? Well, the platform, the medium surely is. But hopefully, the information being conveyed contains, if nothing else, guidance and a direction towards a more conscious experience of reality, including the technology, the platform itself. But more importantly, a better understanding, a better comprehension of yourself. As above, so below. As within, so without. As in microcosm, so in macrocosm. This is really important to grasp, that there could not be the world as we know it. There could not exist the mechanicity of the global civilization or whatever civilization we happen to be in right now. Whether you're in the West or you're in China or in India or wherever you find yourself in the world, what you experience in macrocosm is a projection of humanity's psychology. Could not be any other way. It would be absolutely impossible for humanity to exist in any kind of system or structure that was anything other than a projection of its psychology. Now, materialist science and early childhood developers and psychologists, pediatric psychiatrists and whatnot, they love to talk about how we humans are a product of our environment and that the environment impacts us and affects us. Very rarely do they talk about the reverse. And the reason why they don't want to talk about the reverse is because they're coming at it from intellect, and the intellect, materialist, rational intellect, works first and foremost for the egos, for the Black Lodge, for mechanical nature. It's an AI. An AI does not want you to focus within. Developmental psychology, psychology in general, what does it do? It talks about trauma, how all of your pain and suffering was imposed on you when you were a child or while you were growing up. You had these so-called traumatic effects. Why? Why are they so focused on everything is outside of you? Because mechanical nature wants you to be in a state of reactivity. Mechanical nature wants you to blame everyone and everything. Mechanical nature wants you to have a love-hate relationship with the world. Because in that love-hate relationship, you are divided and conquered. Between loving and hating, between desiring and wanting too much to not wanting at all. In other words, between craving and aversion. But like the animal aspect of ourselves, the mechanical aspect of ourselves, we can only be trained, we can only be conditioned through an externalized process of craving and aversion. What we call Pavlovian conditioning. How do you train a dog? When it obeys, when it does good behaviors, behaviors that you want it to do, you give it a treat. You reward it, externally reward it. You give it something that it craves. And that stimulates a connection between what it was doing and what it was craving. And when it does something that you don't want it to do, when it misbehaves, you punish it. You create a condition that it does not want, that it has an aversion to. And then it creates an association, a condition in its psychology that says, oh, okay, this behavior equals bad. That behavior equals good. That behavior equals reward. I like reward. I crave reward. And that's how we train animals. And that's how we school children. And that's how humanity is conditioned externally. And that's why psychology wants you to focus on the way in which the world has, quote, conditioned you or traumatized you and affected you and impacted you. That somehow you are a perfect, innocent being and that you were born perfect and that it was the world that corrupted you and ruined you and your parents and your upbringing and everything else. Now, why would interest it? Why would that be so important? Why would that be so important? And when you look around the world today, it just so happens that prior to today's live stream, I had the serendipitous encounter with some recent videos by a woman named Whitney Webb. She is probably one of the preeminent, I don't want to say conspiracy theorists, because she deals with, her focus is she has a tight focus on the new world order, the one world government, and the imposition of, the power structures and elites desire to have total control and dominance over humanity. So she's very focused on civil liberties and constitutional rights and the ever encroaching tactical maneuvers being made by those in power and authority to whittle away at citizens' constitutional rights in the name of order, in the name of peace, in the name of health and wellness, and in the name of what's best for society, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not fair to call her a conspiracy theorist. All of her reporting is very well researched and very well backed up. She is an independent journalist, to the best of my knowledge. That's her background. But she was also a whistleblower, and she has quite a colorful background, which I'm not going to spend any time getting into. But the point is, yeah. So Leah has a good term here. She says that Whitney is a conspiracy realist, not a conspiracy theorist, but a conspiracy realist. But her focus is entirely external. Her focus is entirely out there and on others and on the elites and on the power structure and the system and so on. And the more you listen to her, the more you get a sense of how that big machine, the system, is encroaching ever more on humanity, and that eventually, if enough people so-called wake up and decide enough is enough, that this will spark some sort of revolution, some sort of mass revolt or mass uprising to overthrow those in power and to do a complete reorganization or role reversal or flip the tables, as it were, however you want to think about it, much like the French Revolution or so many other revolutions that have taken place around the world and throughout history. And the word revolutions is in the title of today's live stream. When we succumb to that way of thinking and that way of seeing the world, that if only I could grasp power and authority out there, if only I could be in charge, or if only those whom I trust could seize power and overthrow those malicious individuals, whatever minority it is that is currently running the show. If only we could take over, if only we were running the show, things would be so different and all of our problems would go away. And there's a very good chance that some sort of revolution, here in the West at least, along those lines may be fast approaching. Some sort of mass revolt. But like the psychologist that works for the Black Lodge, that works for mechanical nature, is entirely identified and attached to his mechanical rational mind, tells you that all your problems come from out there. The revolutionary, the Whitney Webbs, the conspiracists, whether they're a conspiracy theorist or a conspiracy realist, they, like the psychologist, they all want to convince you that all of your problems have to do with out there. It's the way the world is, the way the world is being run into the ground. It's the way you are being secretly manipulated and controlled and abused and et cetera, et cetera. Out there, out there, out there. There's an irony to this title, this this title that Leah suggests for Whitney Webb, that she's not a conspiracy theorist, she's a conspiracy realist. And the irony is, there is no out there. Nothing out there is real. Nothing. It doesn't exist. There is no out there. The ancient Hindus called it Maya, illusion. It is a wholly fabricated, wholly dreamt reality. It doesn't exist. It is virtual in every sense of the word. That doesn't mean that it's digital. It's not, it doesn't mean that our reality is running on some massive server farm somewhere in the universe, as the simulation theorists like to theorize, that the whole universe is some massive virtual reality program, and we are all paid into it, and we're all experiencing this massive virtual reality. So they dream of some sort of advanced server farm somewhere in the universe that's creating this video game, this virtual reality called the universe. It's not that. But it is a program, an existence, a level of consciousness that is wholly governed by duality, by ones and zeros, in the abstract sense. On, off, yes, no, right, left, me, you, us, them. Craving and aversion. Out there and in here. But what's out there has two natures, divine and mechanical. Just as in here we have two natures, divine and mechanical. But the nature we experience out there is a projection. It is an illusion. It is every bit an illusion as the motion picture that you watch on a screen in the theater is an illusion. It's an illusion. There is no such thing as a motion picture. Listen, take those words into account very carefully. There is no such thing as a motion picture. They call it movies. They call it the motion picture industry, the Motion Picture Association of America. There is no such thing. What you and I experience as a movie is a series of still photographs, 24 per second, in 70 millimeter or in IMAX. The frame rate is higher. There's a higher number of still images every second. That's why IMAX is able to show movement with greater fidelity, greater clarity, because there's less motion blur because instead of getting 24 frames per second or 30 frames per second. I believe it's 60 frames per second. It's the same thing with digital, because digital, there's no film at all. All the photographs are virtual and digital, but it's again, it's a very high frame rate. It's at least double 24. So without getting into a lesson on the technicalities of film, it's like 24, 30, 48, and then 60, and then there's super high frame rates as well, like 120 and even higher than that. And then you have, because then there are these very specialized cameras that are designed to capture ultra fast movements, and then you play them back in slow motion. And that's when you have these tremendous images of that have been slowed down. And the reason why they can be slowed down is because there are so many more frames of so many more photos being taken per second. So when you play it back at normal speed, everything gets slowed down because now you're stretching out the time scale. And that's when you see those incredible slow motion videos and whatnot of exploding balloons or actual explosions, or or fluids and liquids, and or hummingbirds and their wings flapping, like other things that are so fast that the eye itself cannot discern the individual movement. It's too fast for us, right? So a dragonfly vibrating its wings at whatever frequency they do, like 1,000 flaps per second or whatever. We can't see that with the naked eye, but it's one of these high frame rate slow motion cameras can capture that. And then in slow motion, you actually see these wings moving up and down in a way that you would never be able to otherwise see. But again, the point is, it's all an illusion. There is no such thing as motion pictures. It's just numbers of still images per second. That's all it is. And a movie is a projection. All those images are passing in front of a light bulb in this thing that we call the projector. You just get photographs going in front of a light bulb and projecting that onto the screen. And all of reality, what we call reality, is no less an illusion. It's just the nature of the illusion, the nature of the technology, and the nature of the projection is different. It's consciousness, and it's light interacting through consciousness in order for us to have an experience. And what we are experiencing is a projection of ourselves in macrocosm. It is a shared projection of all the consciousness of all the beings in whatever cosmos, whatever macrocosmos we find ourselves in. So our macrocosmos is this earth, is this planet. So our collective consciousness and our collective unconsciousness and subconsciousness is shared with that of the planet and all the other beings on it. Which is why our perception of reality is tied to what appears to be out there, but there is no out there. There is only in here. So when people beat their chest and light the torches and sharpen their pitchforks and paint their placards and grab their megaphones and to go on their marches and to go on their, as an angry mob to storm the Bastille like they did during the French Revolution, they fail to realize how they are being played in that moment. And that no amount of anger and frustration and pride and jealousy and envy, that is envy, and fear and desire to be in control can result in a utopia. And no amount of overthrowing dictators and despots and oligarchies and international banksters and fraudsters and the global elite, no amount of anger and vitriol expressed towards them, and no amount of tearing down what they have built is going to lead to a utopia. If it is done with anger, if it is done with envy and fear and the desire to control, because what will be built in its place, what will have caused the tearing down of one and setting up of the other? Kathy says control is an illusion. It's within. Well, we're controlled from within. The reason why we believe we're controlled from without is because it's a projection of how we're controlled from within. And which is why psychology never tells us to look within for the causes of our suffering. Buddhism does, but not psychology. Psychology wants everybody to believe that they're all traumatized, that they're all living with trauma. But they don't actually tell them, but the cause of the trauma, the source of the trauma is inside you, not outside you. But you can't say that because that's victim blaming. They come up with all of these clever ways of avoiding and evading the truth. Because if I say that if you had a very difficult, challenging childhood in whatever happened to you, that was there to bring to the surface elements of your psychology that were buried deep in your subconscious mind. There was only one way to bring them to the surface, and that they had to be triggered. And you attracted into your life the very circumstances required for you to become conscious of the demons inside of you. Now, that's an esoteric truth. That's a fact of revolutionary psychology. But if I say that to a contemporary psychologist, then they'll say, "Oh, what are you saying? The woman who was raped needed to be raped? Now you're victim blaming. Now you're blaming the woman or the child who was molested as a child. Now you're saying that it was right that they was molested, that they needed to be in order to heal from something. That's grotesque, and that's sadistic and masochistic, and that's victim shaming and victim blaming. And they'll come up with all of these reasons why that fact must be completely eradicated from the realm of possibility. But they don't consider the alternative. They don't consider the alternative. That the reason why they had to experience that is because in a previous life, they did it to others. And the only reason why they had the capacity to commit such violations against others was because of an entity, an algorithm, a mechanical entity inside of them that compelled them to victimize others. And in the ancient world, and wow, more recently, as recently as a few hundred years, and even today, we call these our demons. And if someone has inside of them a demon that compels them to violate others, if that demon is not addressed in childhood, if that demon is not brought to the surface in the form of a traumatic experience in which the individual, the monad, the consciousness, experiences the trauma that the demon inside of them caused others in previous lifetimes and will do so again. Will do so again. It's inevitable because a machine does what it was designed to do. A machine does what it is. Unless that individual, that consciousness, has the ability to consciously experience what it means to be a victim, they will be invariably become another violator, another, they will just go through another life doing the same thing they did before, only now it's going to be worse. It's going to be more intense. They're going to be further down in psychological hell. There must be a way for them to see and experience the hell that they caused others. And there's only one way to know that. You cannot appreciate what a victim of such violence goes through unless you yourself experience it. And if that's what it takes, if that's what you need in order to learn from your past mistakes and to make sure that you will never do that to anybody else, then that's what has to happen. Now you can call that hell, and it is. It's psychological hell. It's tremendous suffering and pain. But if you go through that a number of times or once or twice or whatever that you need to go through to face your own demon, because it's your demon now who's being triggered by the violation, because it's attracting the same level of malevolence that is inside of it, that it's inside of you, so that you can experience that malevolence for yourself that you have submitted others to in previous lives. This is how karma works. It's not there to punish. It's there to illuminate. It's there to show. It's there for you to experience, for you to gain the wisdom required, the wisdom, the experience needed to be able to realize, oh, so that's what makes violating others so terrible. Now I know how terrible that is. Now, when you face the temptation from within, you have an experience of being a victim. Now you can what? You can empathize. Now you can feel the suffering of your victims because you know that suffering yourself. Until you can empathize with those who you violate, with those who you hurt, until you can empathize with their pain, the mechanical algorithms which made you cause them pain in the first place will continue. Because there's no empathy there to stop them, to prevent them, to balance out the equation, to resist the temptation or the impulse or the urge. EMP, it's our only weapon against AI. It's our only weapon against the machines, against mechanicity. Empathy. Because what is it that a machine cannot do? Your toaster or your kettle or your stovetop or your barbecue will burn you again and again and again and again and again and again. It will do so long as you keep putting your hand on it. It'll keep burning you. It cannot empathize with you. It just does what it does. And if you touch it, you're going to get burned. It's a machine. It is incapable of knowing what it's doing to you. And if you talk to a contemporary psychologist and you ask them, what is the defining quality, the defining characteristic of a psychopath? The worst of the worst, the Hannibal Lecters, he's fictional, but you know what I mean. They will say unequivocally, it is a complete and total absence of empathy. This is the difference between a so-called normal person and a sociopath and a psychopath. On a gradient, the normal person has the capacity to feel others' suffering and pain, to empathize with their pain, and therefore they do not follow through on their urges or impulses to cause pain. The sociopath has far less empathy, and the psychopath has none. The psychopath is completely narcissistic, is completely self-centered, and driven entirely by mechanical forces. A psychopath is like a robot. That's why the Terminator and other such AI robots from science fiction are so terrifying, because they're so relentless in their actions, and they're able to be relentless and cold and clinical and exacting in the execution of their program, because they have no empathy. There's no recourse for them choosing an alternative path. The revolution that humanity needs, the revolution, the only revolution that can save humanity from mechanicity and mechanical nature, is empathy. It's not anger. It's not jealousy. It's not fear and the desire to control and be in control of one's destiny. All of that is mechanical desire. All of that is mechanicity itself. You're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and you contend that you are right to do so. But whereas before you marked yourself as enslaved to Peter, now you're just enslaving yourself to Paul. That's the expression, robbing Peter to pay Paul. That's what it means. Before you thought you were Peter's slave, now you're going to be Paul's slave. But at least you're not Peter's slave. That's what robbing Peter to pay Paul means. Because you were never enslaved by anyone or anything out there. You were only enslaved by your own mechanicity inside, in here. which is going to create opportunities for you to be divided and conquered, for it to split you between different binary dualities. For example, Republican and Democrat, capitalist and socialist, right? Fascist and anarchist. I mean, there's an endless number of these. Christian and Muslim, or Jew and Muslim, or Muslim and Christian, or Christian and Jew, and it just goes on and on and on. All these dichotomies, all these binary dualities, and it's identification and attachment with them that you think you're winning, but the whole time you're just being played. It's like you're being batted around like a ping pong ball, or like a pinball in a pinball machine. The revolution we need is the great rebellion, the revolution of the self against the false self. And the false self is entirely that self that we identify with, that is associated with this outside world that doesn't exist. That's an illusion. And if you follow the logic of that in meditation and say, well, if my mortal self, my physical body, is outside of my perception, right? Because your consciousness, you can be conscious of your body. That means the source of your consciousness is somewhere within, and you are wearing this physical body as something out there that you experience, that is a part of this physical reality. Then your mortal self too is an illusion, and the self that you identify with is an illusion. But you very much are identified with it and attached to it, and you fear losing it, and you fear it being harmed and it being hurt, and you are traumatized when it suffers, and you feel berated when it is criticized, and you feel incensed and angry, violated and insulted when its beliefs are challenged, its conditioned dogmatic beliefs and theories and opinions of the world are challenged. We call that cognitive dissonance. When part of the illusion doesn't agree with another part of the illusion, and you become embroiled in that conflict, and you forget yourself, and you abandon peace, you abandon equanimity, you abandon empathy, and you are caught up in the mechanical algorithms of fear and anger and loathing and frustration and envy and desire to dominate and control, and whatever the case may be. And these programs, these algorithms take you over and run with you. And they make you to feel like you are taking charge and you are taking action. Meanwhile, it's your consciousness and all of your energy that's being siphoned off and enslaved to the illusion. And your own mechanical nature is imprisoning you. And it does so just as easily as World of Warcraft caused so many people to lose themselves in the game. or just as the big screen movie Avatar or whatever it is you're watching in the movie theater causes you to lose yourself for 2 hours and you forget yourself, or your favorite streaming show causes you to lose track of time as you're binging it, or even something as simple as Candy Crush Saga or Tetris or any of these, Angry Birds or any of these very, very, very simple cell phone games, Flappy Bird. And you sit there and Candy Crush Saga, level after level after level after level. Before you know it, the battery is going dead on your phone. You look at your watch, 4 hours has gone by, and you've just been playing this stupid puzzle game. Well, if we can be hypnotized and enslaved by Candy Crush playing on this thing, imagine what the game world out there is capable of making us forget, making us lose ourselves in. And why it is always drawing us out, our attention, our focus out there, out there, out there, out there. Why the screens in the movie theaters had to get bigger and bigger and bigger until we got IMAX and OmniMax, and why the 3D soundscape went from 2 speakers to 4 speakers to 5.1 speakers to 7.1 to now, I don't know, Dolby Atmos, 16, 17, 32 speakers. Total sound field immersion, right? Total immersion. And now we have virtual reality, and now, and it's always one step further and further and further and more to more out there, out there, out there, out there. Because the only truth is in here. The only reality is in here. And the only genuine revolution is in here. Because what's out there is a projection. And if you don't like what you see out there, you got to change in here. But how do we do that? Behind me, we have images of the Virgin Mary, the Divine Mother, the pure, the innocent, the chaste, the glorious Mother of Christ. She is Divine Mother Nature, or Devi Kundalini Shakti. She is the one who furnishes us with all we need in this life, including all of our tests and our trials and our ordeals, some of which I described earlier, some of the more extreme tests and trials that, unfortunately, nowadays people are guided into believing they're all trauma and they're all the cause of their suffering and whatnot. And because of that, so many people who are abused as children end up being abusers themselves, because the life lesson that they receive, they're not allowed to process as thus. So many well-intentioned, well-meaning people tell them that that's trauma and that they were, that's not their fault, and that they have all these psychological problems because of that. And then they turn around, and that basically allows the demon, it lets the demon off the hook. And so when they grow up, the demon just goes and does what it was going to do anyway. It's not that abusers become, it's not that those who are abused turn into abusers. They were already abusers. That's why they were abused, in an effort to give them empathy, to be able to balance and prevent them from being an abuser again. But the Black Lodge is clever. Mechanical nature is clever, and the mechanical nature wants its programs to run. It wants its agents to do what they do deterministically. The cogs in the machine, they want them to operate, because their job in the Kali Yuga is to tear down humanity, is to collapse this humanity, this global civilization. So then that's why they come up with this notion of trauma. Now, there are cases of actual trauma. We call it shell shock, or at least we called it shell shock in World War I. And there are cases where incredibly traumatic events can allow demons to enter somebody. And there are other cases, but that's a result of the nervous system being stretched to such a degree that there's a breakdown, and in that breakdown there's a vulnerability, and there are many entities hovering around us and swirling around us all the time that are trying to take advantage of us. So there are cases of that, but not all cases of trauma are that. And even in those cases, it is wrong to turn around and say, well, it's the trauma that caused this, because that is letting the individual off the hook, and that is not going to help the individual comprehend and eliminate whatever it is that's possessing them, either prior to the event or after the event. It doesn't matter. The person is now living with an entity, and they have to overcome the entity, not let themselves off the hook and say, oh, there now, and try to look back at the event itself as being the cause of their suffering. It's not. It's not. So our Divine Mother furnishes us with all we need in this life in order to accomplish the task at hand. And what is the task at hand? To undertake the great rebellion, to rebel against our own mechanical nature. This is why Master Samael called it revolutionary psychology. Not out there, but in here. Because in order for us to be here and experience this virtual reality, we needed to embed ourselves according to the laws that govern this virtual reality. It's like when you play a video game, you have to assume the role of a character in that game world, and you must play the game according to its rules. But all games have a winning condition and a losing condition. And if you are familiar with playing games of any kind, whether it's card games, whether it's chess or video games, you know that there are many, many, many more ways to lose than there are to win. Another way of saying that is that the game is hard. And video games are, well, okay, you can say games of chance, card games, for example, or let's say even roulette, like any games in a casino. It goes without saying that the odds of winning are far fewer than the odds of losing. Take a roulette wheel. They spin the roulette wheel and they throw the marble, right? How many numbers can the marble land on? And how many numbers can you bet on? Same thing with poker. It's the same thing with slot machines, with any game in a casino. I mean, the whole notion of a casino is that the casino becomes insanely wealthy on the laws of statistics, on the laws of chance. If the odds were even in a casino, the casino would be broke because of so many people who come into play. There's that expression, right? The house, the odds are stacked against you, and the house always wins. But games have to be that way, because if they weren't, there'd be no point in playing. Would you play a game where you were guaranteed to win every time? Would you play a game that posed no challenge? But the nature of the game is what's important here. To really understand and comprehend the nature of the game. And if it is true that our Divine Mother furnishes us with all we need in this life, including all of our tests and our trials and our ordeals, and she is Divine Mother Nature, we have to understand, we have to comprehend the duality of that. The duality of the divine feminine, which is how I began the talk, albeit maybe the sound quality wasn't so great at the beginning. But I began the talk at the beginning when I said, well, isn't it good to get out into nature and be in nature? And isn't nature beautiful and wonderful? And doesn't it refresh and rejuvenate us, et cetera, et cetera? Well, it is, and it does. But its mechanical nature also seeks to consume us, to devour us, because that's what mechanical nature does. And that's where we have that famous archetype, or shall we say infamous archetype, known as the harlot of Babylon, the whore of Babylon, the opposite of the Divine Mother. The opposite of the virgin is the whore. She, the great whore, the great harlot, who seduces Babylon. And they build this enormous tower in her honor. But her nature is to tempt and to give these gifts of pleasure, of sensation, of stimulation, but in exchange. The harlot, the whore, takes our vitality, our creativity, our sexual potency, and our money. And in her seduction, she hypnotizes. She takes our consciousness. Because if original sin was fornication, that's the oldest profession, or so they say. And you lose everything when you pay to have sex with a prostitute. You lose yourself, your consciousness, your sexual vitality, and money. And on top of everything else, you have to pay. You truly become a poor man. You are devoured, you are consumed by the harlot, just as Babylon was. Because a machine needs energy to survive. And a machine must fulfill its programming. It must execute its function as per its design, meaning it's entirely deterministic. And when you consider, just for a moment, what this world is geared toward in terms of sex and sexuality, how easy is it to be chaste versus how easy it is to be a fornicator? And in which direction does the world lean toward? And in which direction does the world encourage you to go? And that's no accident. Remember, it's a projection. It's not real. It's just a projection of what's in our own psychology. So observe yourself. How easy is it to resist the temptations of the flesh? So last week, the conclusion was, as a creator, to struggle and suffer and sacrifice, to make the word flesh, and to embody that divinity in what we create. But we are already that, to one degree or another, according to our level of being. We are all a spirit, a monad, a being here in flesh. So there must be a challenge associated with the flesh. And if our flesh is the Divine Mother, the body of the Divine Mother, and its aspect is divine, virginal, pure, and that's that pure aspect of nature that we all can sense and know and feel is beautiful and divine, the innocence of nature, in recognition of the duality of the divine feminine. Where there is a virgin, there must be a whore. Where there's a virgin, there must be a harlot. Then it is in the temptations of the flesh It's in the indulgences of the flesh. It's in the identification and attachment to, the identification with and attachment to the flesh. The mechanical, tempting nature of our nature that makes us forget our Divine Mother, that makes us forget the Virgin, that makes us abandon our own purity in favor of sensation, in favor of pleasure, the indulgence of pleasure and the avoidance of pain. Because every duality, there's duality within duality within duality. In other words, the harlot is the mistress of desire, desire, dethrone. But the virgin, what? The virgin is the consort of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit descends upon the virgin, and united as one, the Holy Spirit, the divine masculine, and the virgin, the divine feminine, when united, they give rise, they give birth to the divine androgen, the Christ, the innermost intimate Christ, the Christ child inside of us. Who is the most rebellious, revolutionary figure in all of history, who performed the Great Rebellion on a level, on the highest possible level. Jesus of Nazareth, that particular incarnation of the Christ. But the harlot would dethrone the Spirit. If our energy becomes aligned not with the Virgin and the purity and the innocence, such that we can become one with the Spirit, but rather is drawn into the other side and is consumed and given in to mechanicity, well, what does a harlot have? Many, many, many countless Johns. The harlot has sex with whoever pays. And in every moment when the harlot takes a new John who's desirous, who wants of her gifts, who wants the gifts that she can give, in that moment, the bedchamber of Babylon, because remember, Babylon worships the whore. She is their queen. And all of those individual eyes, those individual egos, desire to bed the queen of Babylon. Desire, dethrone, desire. Whereas the Divine Mother only has one spouse, the Holy Spirit. And as the divine two aspects of the Trinity, they give rise to the third, the Christ, who is the heir to the throne. He is the heir to the kingdom of heaven. the Son of God, the Son of the King, he who sits upon the throne. This is why Christ is both the Son of God and the Son of Man. Because we have a divine mother and a Holy Spirit, it is up to us to choose whether to be or not to be, to give rise to our innermost intimate Christ through the great act of rebellion, the great act of revolution, or to give ourselves to the whore and to be the pimp who whores out our divine mother to all of these Johns, all of the different egos of our psychology. Each one that longs to rule and sit upon the throne of our psychology. One day it's fear, then it's envy, then it's anger. And it's not even day by day, it's moment by moment. And each one of them are taking the gifts of our divine mother, our sexual energy and our consciousness. And our world, our Babylon, becomes a living hell. And it is ruled by all of these Johns, all of these eyes, all of these egos, these demons that are having sex, fornicating with our divine mother. And when our world out there is becoming every day more and more a living Babylon, but we know it doesn't exist, we know it's just a projection of what's happening inside of us, then it becomes clear what the great rebellion and the great revolution we must undertake really is. Because that duality of the Divine Mother is present inside of us, the virgin and the whore. And do we sanctify? Do we remember and honor and defend and hold upright our Divine Mother, the Virgin Mother of Christ? And live our life worthy of her? Or do we whore her out to all of the egos in our psychology, all the mechanical algorithms that want a piece of that energy and a piece of that consciousness and want to sit upon that throne for a few moments? They want a few moments. A few weeks or months ago, there was this momentary scandal is not the right word. It was this momentary flash in a pan thing happening that there was some OnlyFans woman with an OnlyFans channel who said that she was going to break the world's record for having the most sex in a 24-hour period or something like that. So she was taking names and building a list, and she was going to televise on her OnlyFans channel that she was going to have sex with more than 6,000 men in a 24-hour period or whatever, and she's going to break the world record. It was just this stupid story going around on the internet several weeks ago, or maybe it was a few months ago. I can't remember now exactly. The reason why it came into my mind, though, is because that's the equivalent of what we're talking about here. Right? What do we make of our Divine Mother, a virgin or a whore? And it's very much in our hands, moment by moment. The system that we have to rebel against, the forces of control seeking to exploit us and enslave us, that we need to escape from and free ourselves from, are within. I wish to share with you, just for a moment, the following image. This is the Ouroboros. Now, this is also shown as, the Ouroboros is also shown as a single serpent in a okay, like that, right? So it's just like, but the implication is the same. I prefer the one that's in the shape of infinity because it gets across more clearly the infinite nature of this. This is the Divine Mother. But it's also the nature of, it's the nature of the game. It's the game. And there is a great deal of esoteric wisdom contained within this symbol. The implications of this and what we can learn from this is tremendous. It is not so easy to explain, but it's when you meditate on it that it reveals itself. Master Samael does a pretty good job of explaining it, although I can't say that I've spent too much time. Oh, what happened? Um, the way this is the interaction between divine and mechanical nature. It's another way to orient the dichotomy or the duality. And as you can see, the head of the serpent is consuming its own tail. This relates directly to that aspect of the game, mechanical nature, that requires energy to live. And seeks attention, needs to be witnessed, seeks to enslave consciousness. This is the mechanical aspect of nature. But what's not immediately apparent is the fact that mechanical nature operates under the laws of entropy. Yes, there's some evolution involved, but it's always breaking down and breaking apart, as it never really grows in how this image suggests that it does. And we just said a moment ago that it's consuming energy and consciousness. It's devouring divine nature. And when I said it's about the word becoming flesh, we are what we eat. This is where an understanding or appreciation of the Tao comes into play, because in the Tao we have the light in the dark, but we have the light in the dark and the dark in the light. So there is more happening here. And what the more that is happening here is the production of gnosis, of self-evident experiential knowledge. See, that is what is produced in the process by which mechanical nature is trying to devour and defeat divine nature. As it consumes, right? So if you, for a moment, consider that your spirit, your being, is temporarily consumed by this mortal vessel, just as your consciousness is bottled up inside the ego, and your identification and attachment and the forgetting, so you are consumed by this false self. It is your only opportunity to grow as a divine being. This is the paradox of the duality, and why Black Lodge ultimately works for the White Lodge. And it works for the White Lodge through an incessant, deterministic, relentless execution of its mechanical nature, which is to devour and devour and devour and consume and consume and consume and ensnare and ensnare and enslave and enslave. Right? But that's the game. Those are the parameters of the game. And the more you engage with it, you must allow yourself to be devoured by it a little in order to grow, in order to master that level of being devoured. And then you grow more, that you then feed back into the mouth of the snake. It I'm not sure just how easy it is for the intellect to grasp this. But to the consciousness, it's self-evident. And it's your experience of suffering in life that makes this self-evident when you completely commit yourself and devote yourself to, let's say, practicing the piano or studying a subject, or your devotion to your spouse or your family. It is through devotion to devote yourself, that you become better through the act of devotion. In fact, you can become a master by devoting yourself to the piano and practicing the piano. You can become a master of the piano. But you don't want to be completely consumed. This is the trick. This is the razor's edge. This is the fine line and the tightrope walk that we must master, because this is what the Buddha called the middle way. Because if you go too far, then you will be consumed, and the serpent will eat its tail, and the whole thing shrinks, and you can be devoured and consumed into oblivion. This is what's the downward spiral on the Alm of Life, where if you lose sight of the game and you forget yourself, you forget your divine mother, the divine aspect of the Ouroboros, that is giving herself, giving of herself, sacrificing herself for this process to take place. This is the phoenix being consumed in the flames in order to be born again of the ashes. This is the same symbol or the same archetypal truth being expressed in a different way, in a different symbol. Sacrifice. What are you willing to give? What are you willing to sacrifice? Are you willing to devote yourself? The self that doesn't really exist, that is an illusion. But in the process of giving that up, how will you grow? This relationship of being consumed, consuming, being consumed, and growing, and devoting and sacrificing to be consumed, to grow. And Kathy says, balance and moderation. Or how about give and take? Even in finance, we have the concept of appreciation and investing oneself for the sake of one's future. So setting aside the instant gratification and whatever temptation lays before you, and setting aside that temptation and not indulging, not giving in to your animal nature in the moment in exchange for dividends paid out to you at some future time because you were able to resist the temptation in the moment. This idea, this notion of appreciation, of increasing value of, so like a savings account, and having the discipline to put a little bit of, squirrel away a little bit of money every month into your savings account, and with compound interest at the end of the year, squirreling a little bit of money away each week at the end of the year, you might have accumulated enough now to make that necessary purchase, or take that necessary holiday to refresh and rejuvenate yourself, which you are now able to do because you were disciplined, and you allowed your invested some of what you had little by little so that it would appreciate. Whereas you probably could have blown all of that money each and every week on, feeling sorry for yourself, and drinking, or eating junk food to try to make yourself feel better instantaneously, momentarily, for a few hours, to forget your worries and forget your problems. But by the end of the year, you're right back where you started. You haven't appreciated at all, and you don't have the money to take that holiday, to take that much needed vacation, to refresh and rejuvenate, to go on a spiritual retreat, or to go to Tibet, or go to Egypt, or wherever you might go in the world to refresh and rejuvenate and rediscover yourself. Now you're unable to do that because you wasted all your time and money throughout the year feeling sorry for yourself and indulging based on what your desires wanted in that moment, which was a quick fix. Right? Like any drug, like any addiction, like anything to just, So all of that and so much more is embodied in this archetype. The great rebellion, like all rebellions, like all revolts, you must know your enemy, but you must know yourself. And this afternoon, I posted a video of a cat essentially playing with a live snake. And if you saw that video on Facebook of this cat toying with this snake, and I said, you know, observe that video well, because that that video reveals what we need to do while engaging our mechanical self. Because to master the serpent, that serpent which is trying to bite you and possibly trying to poison you, is trying to consume you. But if you can learn to engage with it and give but a little of yourself in the process, just enough to be able to learn from it, to learn its movements and positions, to comprehend that serpent and master it, like all those, like, why is it a thing? Everywhere you go in the world, it's a thing that there are these men or these people that call themselves snake charmers and snake handlers. And their whole shtick is being able to charm snakes, to hypnotize them with flutes, because everywhere you go, certainly in the South, not so much in the North, but in the South, everywhere you go in the world, there are snakes, and poisonous snakes for that matter. And snakes like, you know, dark corners to make their nests, and they like warm places and stuff like that. In other words, snakes get into people's houses. And if you have poisonous snakes in your house and you have pets or children, you got a problem. So, from a practical standpoint, there have always needed to be individuals whose expertise was going in and getting rid of snakes, right? And these were the snake charmers, but they also performed like that, like they made it a whole show out of it. And there was always this quasi spiritual thing about snake charming and snake charmers. Yeah, Kathy says, as Kathy says, swipe that bitch. She's referring to that cat playing with that snake. But there's this archetypal truth playing out with these snake charmers who know how to handle snakes and who can get snakes to perform for them and do what they want them to do and not get bitten by the snakes. There is wisdom there. And the serpent is the universal symbol for the sexual force, for the divine mother, for our energy, our vitality. That which mechanical nature wants, that which is being devoured by the Ouroboros. But what can we accomplish with the serpent, working with the serpent, without allowing ourselves to be completely consumed by it, or if we are consumed by it in the right way, like the phoenix who is consumed in the flames and the fires of Kundalini. And that brings us to sexual alchemy, the transformation, the transmutation of lead into gold, the transmutation of the lead of ego into the gold of the human soul, or the false self into the true self, by working with those fires, but working with them in such a way that we don't get burned, which happens to be another universal phenomenon of yogis and spiritual practitioners, or holy men or whatever. You have these fire eaters and these fire walkers walking on hot coals and burning coals and all this kind of stuff, and the mastery of fire. Now, That's an externalized expression, just like the snake charmer is an externalized expression. And the cat playing with this serpent is an externalized expression. But as above, so below. As within, so without. The word made flesh means the living, breathing word of God is all around us and within us. What do all of these symbols, what do all of these embodied expressions of these archetypes out there in the world, what are they trying to tell us? Well, they're trying to tell us, they're trying to show us what it takes to achieve mastery. Mastery cannot be achieved by avoidance. That's why chastity, the way the Catholic Church teaches it, is a failure. Abstinence is a failure. If you abstain from working with your sexual energy, you will fail, you will falter. Imagine a snake charmer who doesn't work with snakes. Imagine a fire eater who doesn't work with fire, or who avoids fire at all costs. That's absurd. Mastery means what it means. Mastery, but not getting burned, but not being bitten, not being consumed by. Because if you are consumed by something that you are trying to master, but you end up being consumed by it, it's called an obsession. And you become a slave to it. You're not its master, but its slave. An example of this would be Bobby Fischer. Bobby Fischer, who was an incredible grandmaster of chess. And he achieved the highest levels of a world championship in the 70s during the height of the Cold War. But he was consumed by it. He was consumed by his mind, his intellect. He was consumed by the whole, by the world of chess, by the game of chess, by all the politics around it and everything else. He mastered the game, but could not do so while also mastering himself. So he mastered chess, but he didn't master the bigger game, which was mastery of self. And as a result, he was vulnerable and he was naive, and chess consumed him, and his own intellect and his own psychology consumed him, and he ended up, well, it's a sad story, really. But like so many times I've expressed that the line between genius and madness is a hairline, because those beings that have tremendous consciousness and tremendous potential, they have an adversary that is consummate to their level and appropriate to their level. And if they don't learn mastery, if they do allow the thing that they're trying to master to become an obsession, then it will consume them and they will fall into oblivion. And that's why we have this teaching of the Buddha to say it's the middle way. Neither indulging and obsessing, and neither avoiding, but walking that delicate balance, that delicate tightrope between those two extremes. And sex is no different. To engage in sexuality without giving into lust, without giving into fornication. That's scientific chastity. That's working with the sexual force without becoming obsessed with the orgasm, without becoming obsessed with fornication, without becoming obsessed with pleasure, with the intense release of the sexual energy through the spasm, through the orgasm. That's that excitement, that hyper arousal that I spoke of at the beginning. And when I talked about the ego and mechanical nature always getting us to focus on out there, out there, out there, the orgasm, fornication, is the sexual force, the sexual energy flowing down and out. It's an explosion, it's an expulsion. It's literally taking that which is real and wasting it on that which is an illusion. And yet, your mind will tell you that sex is all about that which is out there. That which is stimulating and that which causes your arousal, which is why pornography is so proliferate in the world today. And the internet is rife with it. It's all over the place. What is pornography? Is absolutely out there. It's absolutely stimulating and arousing, and it only has one purpose and one purpose alone: to get you to release your sexual energy, whether you're a man or a woman. The energy is released. The energy is lost. It's consumed by the mechanical forces inside of you. The revolution is for us not to turn our divine mother into a whore to lust, a whore to fornication, a whore to pornography, to sensation, to short-lived sensory pleasure, arousal, and excitement, but to keep her pure, a virgin. To be a virgin doesn't mean one abstains from sex. To be a virgin means someone abstains from fornication. To be a virgin means engaging in sex, but for the sake of uniting the Divine Mother with the Holy Spirit. Engaging in sex for the purpose of giving birth to the innermost intimate Christ. You cannot give rise to the innermost intimate Christ if you are making a whore out of your Divine Mother and are whoring her to all the egos in your psychology, all the Johns, all the egos, including lust, fear, pride, greed, gluttony, laziness, etc. The revolutionary act is against oneself, the lower self, the animal instincts and mechanical natures of the false self. That's the adversary. That is the global elite that's seeking to enslave and exploit you. And I tell you that the only utopia humanity can know is the utopia that begins in the golden age of a new humanity. And the members of that humanity are selected from this humanity, those who are the best seeds, those who are cultivating within themselves their essence, their spark, their seed of their innermost intimate Christ. Those who have the potential to commit the ultimate sacrifice, the sacrifice of oneself, to be born again of the waters of the Spirit, to be born of the waters of the Spirit, a Christified master, one who has mastered their mechanical nature. As a Christified one, a Christified master, a resurrected master, one who allowed themselves to be consumed in the fires of the Divine Mother in order to be born a risen, Christified one, the fire of fires and the light of lights. It is those individuals who are selected to become the seeds of the next humanity on this planet. But they must be cultivated, they must be cultivated, they must do the work on themselves. They must undertake the great rebellion. And the foundation for that rebellion is empathy. That's what we've been talking about for 3 weeks now. Because that is what mechanical nature does not and cannot possess. At that level. So what differentiates our divine nature from our mechanical nature is the capacity to feel empathy, to feel other suffering. This is what the Buddhists call compassion, by the way. To have compassion, to feel empathy, is the same thing. Compassion for all beings. Now, there is some argument among Gnostics and perhaps among some Buddhists as well, and spiritual initiates in general, as to the necessity for one to become a vegetarian or to become a vegan, and that eating meat is a violation of this law of empathy, this law of compassion, or this because even as a Buddhist or whatever, you don't squish spiders in your house. Even myself, I don't have a fly swatter. If there's a fly in my house and I don't want it in my house, I catch it and I release it outside. But I'm also not a vegetarian. So what does that say about me? Am I a hypocrite? We all must answer this question for ourselves. There is a reason why one would not swat a fly, but one would eat a steak. Swatting a fly, that fly gains nothing in the process of being swatted. But if one eats an animal that has given its life for that purpose, then the monad of that creature benefits because it has given its life so that others may live. The fly that is swatted gave his life for nothing. right? You're taking that life for no reason. So from the perspective of karma, sacrifice for others is the currency of the supernal worlds. It's called selflessness. And if you are born as a monad, if you are born into the animal kingdom, and in the process of your life, you become food for another animal or uh, a humanoid, then you have given your life to give life. And that is an act of selflessness. Even if it wasn't of your choosing. So you were born in a farm and raised on a farm and went to the slaughterhouse. As an animal, that's not exactly in you under your control. And yet, in the eyes of karma, they don't look at that and say, yeah, but you didn't choose to die, so you get no benefit. No, on the contrary. On the contrary, your body became food for others, became life for others. Now, there's an extra level to this, whereas how you use your energy will in part determine what karma befalls the animal whom you ate, because the animal whom you ate sacrificed itself for you and gave you its energy for you to now use that energy. So if you use that energy to try to make the word flesh, then the sacrifice of that animal becomes all the more meaningful and all the more appreciated. You increase the value of that animal sacrifice. But if you use that energy just to fornicate and indulge your primal urges, or to yell at your spouse, or to, just whittle away and just waste it, well, the animal will still benefit for having sacrificed and given its energy to you, but its benefit will be reduced as compared to using the energy in a positive way. So that's something for us to consider when we are undergoing and undertaking this great work called the Great Rebellion, and to rebel and revolt against our animal instincts and our hedonistic desires and our mechanicity. That the animals who have sacrificed themselves for us, they long to be appreciated, and there is no better way to appreciate the sacrifice made for us than by not taking that sacrifice for granted. If somebody gives you something and you waste it, you whittle it away, how does that make them feel? But if somebody gives you something and you take it and you use it to create something beautiful or magical or wonderful, now that person sees that their gift to you was appreciated and and was put toward this greater undertaking, this greater project. So if you're a painter, imagine someone gifting you a box of oil paints or new brushes, and you immediately set to task painting some new masterpiece using the paints and brushes that you were gifted. You see, now you see the pattern here. If you're in need of money, if you're in need of some kind of financial support, and someone deems it you worthy of giving you $500 or $5,000, and you take that money and you go to Vegas and you blow it all on the poker table and the slot machines, well, where does that leave the person who gifted you that money? And where does that leave you? for having taken for granted the generosity of others. If you approach, this is why we say grace before we eat meals, because it's not just the animals who give their life for us. If you eat leafy greens, broccoli and lettuce and carrots, right? You're eating beings. They're not animals, they're plants, but you are devouring them, you are consuming them. Fruit is a little bit different because the apple tree doesn't give its life when you eat its fruit. But there are many types of vegetables and plants that you do consume and they give their life for you. So it's a rebellious act to appreciate and be grateful and not to take for granted. And the reason why you do that is because of empathy. Because you feel for the beings who gave their life for you. And you feel for their legacy. Their legacy is now tied to your legacy. Their karma is tied to your karma. You have a responsibility to them, in other words. They who have given their life, their flesh becomes your flesh. Their life becomes your life. What will you make of their life? What will you make of their sacrifice? Because in that sacrifice, at whatever level it was made, their flesh becomes the word. And you eat that word. Now, what are you going to do with it? Because they make a statement with that sacrifice. The flesh, the word that had become flesh, had now become word. Now, what will you do with that word? Will you in turn make the word flesh again? With your words, with your works, with your creative, with your life, with your partner, with your innermost intimate Christ? What will you beget from that which is given unto you to flow through you? What will you make of it? Because mechanistically, what will come, quote, naturally to you is to forget yourself, forget your divine mother, forget the fact that it's a gift, take it for granted, and indulge whatever it is comes to you in the moment. Whatever pleasures, cravings, or aversions you have in the moment. That's what's going to flow naturally. Exploitation, depreciation, the downward spiral, just taking for granted your gifts and blessings and forgetting your divine mother. In other words, taking the gifts and giving them away to the egos, like turning that into the whore of Babylon. So when we talk about the great rebellion, it's in all things, in all moments, at all times. It is to live in a rebellious spirit, a rebellion against the false self, moment by moment, day by day. Not just when we're with our partner performing sexual alchemy, and then the rest of the time we're indulging our egos. That's not how this works. Because the egos are fornicating with us at all times, and they're trying to turn the Virgin Mother into the whore of Babylon all the time, moment by moment, day by day. Mutaga says, speaking of John's, now is that John chapter 1 verse 9 or 1 John chapter 3 verse 9? No one born of God makes a practice of sinning, for God's seed abides in him, and he cannot keep on sinning because he has been born of God. No one born of God makes a practice of sinning, for God's seed abides in him, and he cannot keep on sinning because he has been born of God. So this verse from John echoes when Jesus says, render unto Caesar that which belongs to Caesar. So one who is born of the harlot of Babylon makes a practice of sinning, for Babylon's desire abides in him, and he must keep on sinning because he has been born of the harlot. But no one born of God makes a practice of sinning, for God's seed abides in him, and he cannot keep on sinning because he has been born of God. This is one who has been born of the waters and the Spirit. But that's the divine self. That's the true self. That's the innermost intimate Christ. And the innermost intimate Christ does not make a practice of sinning. So just as, and that practice of sinning would be, for example, fornication. This is why I said earlier, you cannot give rise to the innermost intimate Christ while you're fornicating, because the innermost, that which is born of God does not make a practice of sinning, does not make a practice of fornication. Kathy says, what I noticed about not eating animal meat is that all smells of the body leave you. Okay. And she says, give thanks to all for all that you eat. And Benjamin Raphael says, to add to Mutaga's point, John is emphasizing that those born of God don't continue in unrepentant habitual sin. He's not saying believers never sin. No, yeah, that's why I had to read it a couple times. But it's because of the specific wording of one who is born of God. To be born of God, remember, when you're born of a man and a woman, right? You're not born of God yet. To be born of God means to be born of the waters and the Spirit. That's what they mean to be born again. To be born of God, right? Because there's many people walking around who don't have human souls, right? They're NPCs. They're just hominids. They're just like machines. You can't say that they were born of God, and they do make a habit of sinning. They make it a habitual habit of sinning. So they're not born of God. They're fornicators, right? Mutaga says, Kathy Holton, indeed, not eating meat has a lot of benefits and takes discipline, but humans tend to make diet a religion. Yeah, I'm not going to open up the can of worms on vegetarianism and veganism. I've said my piece on the subject matter, and vegetarianism just doesn't work for everybody. It's just, I'm sorry, it's just a fact. If it works for you, that's great. Then that's wonderful. But vegetarian and veganism are probably the most guilty. Vegans and vegetarians, especially vegans, are the most guilty of making diet a religion. And too many vegans make their veganism their religion, and they end up going nowhere because they continue to fornicate, and they judge others. They judge meat eaters. They judge omnivores, right? They think they're holier than thou. They think everybody else are sinners because, they think that they're holier than thou, and they think that they're going to heaven. They think their work is done because they don't eat meat, and nothing could be further from the truth. So that's the problem with veganism, is that it lends itself to a kind of obsession and a kind of dogma, a fanaticism that allows them to think of themselves as pure. And then you have, like, when Kathy says it has a lot of benefits, and or sorry, she said that it makes you that you don't have those body odor anymore, etc., etc. Yeah, well, that gives you the illusion of being pure, but that's an illusion. It doesn't make you pure. Just because you don't have body odor doesn't mean you're pure. What's your psychology like? Right? So I know too many vegans or too many that are fanatics, and I can't so much as interact with them without them throwing in my face the fact that they're vegan and I am not. So I'm not even worthy to speak to them, or anything that I say, I'm a hypocrite. So, for example, if I talk about compassion or empathy towards others, uh, there's an individual I know who's a staunch dogmatic vegan who will say, "Oh, you're just a hypocrite because you eat meat." How can you say that? How can you talk about empathy and compassion if you eat meat? You're a hypocrite. So, right? So, I mean, if if that's where your veganism takes you, that you think that nobody can have empathy or compassion unless they are vegan, that's unfortunately your own fanaticism speaking, because there's no truth to that, right? And there have been tyrants throughout history who were vegetarians and vegans. They didn't eat meat, but they slaughtered people. They slaughtered millions of people. So what good was their vegetarianism? What good was their veganism? How did it contribute to their overall empathy and compassion, right? The two things are not connected in the way that people think they are. Kathy says, my body tells me what to eat. I eat meat, fruit, and vegetables. And Benjamin says, defilement is from the heart, from what comes out of our mouths, not the menu. Jesus taught that what truly defiles is what comes out of a person. Mark 7:15. Uh, Mark comments, thus he declared all food clean. Yeah, so this was Jesus's, in part, his response to all of the kosher laws and rules of the Old Testament about eating shellfish and bottom feeders and this and that, about how you can't eat uh, filthy things or bottom feeders or whatever, because that will defile you. Now, having said that, most Gnostics still try to avoid pork. And the only reason why we avoid pork, it's not just that uh, pigs are filthy animals, because they are, but that's not the reason. It's because they're a devolving species, and if you eat a lot of pork, you will find yourself becoming very lustful. You will find your other appetites, your cravings will go through the roof the more pork you eat. I experienced this in Germany when I went to go visit my brother and sister-in-law when they were living in Bavaria. And my goodness, the amount of pork that they eat there. And when in Rome, do as the Romans do. I wasn't in a position to be able to pick and choose, so I ended up eating more pork than normal. And the cravings that I experienced while I was there, like for sugar and these jams and the bread and everything, was just through the roof. My cravings just went like crazy, cranked up to 11. It was nuts. And so I, generally speaking, try to avoid pork if I can. Mutaga says, but many early church fathers were vegetarian and ascetics. This is actually the big difference between modern Christians and early Christians. Mutaga, so? So what? When you say early church fathers, so? What did these early church fathers know about enlightenment, about awakening? What did they know about karma? And as far as ascetics go, ascetics do not impress me. Just as they didn't impress the Buddha Shakyamuni, because he tried that life, he lived that life, and he turned away from that life when he realized, no, it's the middle way that matters. Because the early church fathers were also abstinent or they claim to be, right? So what do they really know? Right? They were dogmatic and they were fanatical. Now this is not a this is there is no I'm not here to denounce vegetarianism or veganism. If it works for you, fine. But do not mistake it for holiness, because the two things are mutually exclusive. Absolutely mutually exclusive. The fact that Buddhists don't try not to squash bugs when they walk, it's part of their mindfulness. They don't go out of their way to harm animals. It's part of their mindfulness, and it's if that factors into their vegetarianism and meat veganism, that then fine. But they don't kid themselves when they eat vegetables, when they eat seeds, when they eat other types of foods. They know that they're taking life. They don't kid themselves. But vegans kid themselves. They think that by not eating animals, they're not taking any life. But they don't. But they're unaware. They're asleep. Right? I vehemently reject the attempt at at using your diet as evidence for your spirituality, right? And this is what Benjamin is intimating at here when Christ said, "It's far more important what comes out of you. What you do with the food that you eat is far more important than what you choose to eat." And that's what this verse that these verses that Benjamin is alluding to here. That's what Jesus is saying. That's what determines what defiles us. And if what comes out of you is pride, mystic pride, because you choose not to eat meat, but what comes out of you is mystic pride and a sense of superiority and a sense of holier than thou because you don't eat meat and others do, then what comes out of you, the mystic pride, has defiled you, and your fanaticism towards vegetarianism and veganism is harming you, not helping you. Mutaga says, "Oops." Kathy says, "I agree, Benjamin." And Mutaga says, "Fasting was a way of life for early Christians. Jesus himself fasted for 40 days and nights." Fasting is an entirely different question. It's a practice, and fasting is your ability to overcome all of your hungers. Because most people, when they practice fasting, they just stop eating, but then they go about doing their regular stuff and they still watch television and they still watch movies and they still listen to music and they still gossip on the phone and they still do other things, right, to try to distract themselves and take their mind off the fact that they're hungry. That's not fasting, right? People think that fasting only has to do with food. No, fasting has to do with everything you take into your body. That's why when the yogis fast, they go up into a mountain, they go into a cave, they go into the desert, they go out into nature. No distractions. To sit and be one with that hunger, with all of the hungers, with all of the boredom. Fasting is to deny all of our animal instincts and all of our animal nature, which is to fill the void, which is to fill our belly and to fill our mind and to fill our ears, right? That's why meditation is so important. And that's why fasting is an important spiritual practice, but that has nothing to do with what you eat. Benjamin says, yes, fasting is like going to a solitary place so that all your animal senses will be deprived. Yes, correct. And Benjamin Raphael, thanks, Kathy, although they are the master's words. ultimately, then, we face in the Kali Yuga at this time, in the end times, we face an unprecedented onslaught by mechanical nature. And everything that's happening out there is designed to empower and trigger and embolden our mechanical nature within and cause us to rise up in anger and frustration and and to grab your pitchforks and your torches and become an angry mob and go storm the Bastille or Washington D.C. or whatever the case may be. But what matters is we undertake the great rebellion within, so that when the AI comes for us and the robots come for us and the World Economic Forum and the global elite try to come at us with all of their nonsense, we can be calm and relaxed and collected and just be an observation of it all and say, this too will pass. Because we have seated ourselves in what is real, in the seat of our own soul, in the Adam nous of our innermost being. And we put our faith and trust in our innermost divine mother and the Holy Spirit, and in their intimate union have given rise to the innermost intimate Christ, whom we serve. And that is the great rebellion. That is the great revolution. It is a revolution of empathy. It is a revolution of humility. And it is, in truth, the only viable weapon strategy that we have against the machines. It is the only way that we can free ourselves from the matrix. Because, as I pointed out, just like the matrix, everything out there is just like the matrix. It's not real. It's just in your mind anyway. We have a few more minutes. Does anybody have any questions or any more comments? Benjamin says, that's true. Honestly, I've also been feeling frustrated with all the corruption in Canada's government. But listening to your talk today reminded me to stay calm and collected, that these things will eventually pass. And what truly matters is abiding in the spirit of the truth and consciousness. Thank you. Well, thank you, Benjamin. And yes, as a fellow Canadian, all I can tell you is I don't even follow it anymore. It's just a joke. And it's like we can't do anything about it. It just needs to play itself out as the farce that it is. And it is a farce at this point. I don't think any reasonable person can look at what's unfolding here in Canada or south of us in the United States or in Europe or anywhere. And I don't think any reasonable person can look at what's unfolding and say, "Oh, well, yeah, that's to be taken seriously." It's a farce. It's like a poorly written comic book or something. Or like a Mad Magazine comic. It's truly surreal in its insanity. Of course, there will, and it will lead eventually, to much wailing and gnashing of teeth, and that's the sad part, and that's lamentable. But look, death is not pleasant. There's no way to whitewash it. There's no way to avoid the unpleasantry of an end where to a humanity that that is in denial of it and wants to live forever. So it's invariably, it is what it is, and there's going to be it's lamentable, it's sad, but it is what it is. That's all I can say. And like I said, I don't put much effort into following it, because what's the point? I try to focus my energies on the task at hand, my task at hand, which is to help those who can be helped, because a great many on this planet are beyond help. And that's the truth. They don't want to be helped. And if I was to reach out my hand to help them, they would refuse it. And they would be angry and incensed that I extended my hand to begin with. So they're beyond help. And so their fate is already sealed. And that's it. And that's just, it's their choice. Nobody can change that. Nobody can impose upon them anything other than the choices that they've already made. And that's just the way it is. We must learn to respect that and abide by that. But we don't have to make it a part of our lives. We don't have to become embroiled in it, right? If other people are taking the fast lane into hell, we are not obligated to follow along, with our smartphone cameras recording everything for posterity or whatever. It's their business. If that's the direction they're going, that's the direction they've chosen. I'm going to focus on those who are still on the edge or who are decidedly going in a different direction. I'm going to focus on and throw my lot in with them. And that's a small number of people in comparison to the 6-7 billion or however many of us there are on this planet. And that's just the way it is. Does anybody else have any questions or comments about the Great Rebellion, the great empath revolutions that we talked about today? I'm going to throw this up just for a moment, one last time, to remind you. If you have not committed this image to memory, commit it to your memory now and meditate on it. On the serpent eating its own tail and all that it implies as an archetype, and all that it manifests as practically in your life. Well, if we have no more questions or comments, then I want to thank you for joining me today, as always. Have a great week. I look forward to seeing you again next week. And until then, to all of you, from myself, take care and inferential peace. Take care, everyone.